Hello and Happy New Year, everybody. Kyle, how you doing?
Fabulously.
Fantastic. And these two fabulous people are here to talk to you about the Motion Design Hotline. That's what you're watching. You're on the Motion Design Hotline right now. Thanks for being with us. And yeah, it's a new year, new us, new vibes. Kyle, any New Year's?
What's new about you? I feel like I'm pretty much the same model that I was previously.
Oh, no. I have a USB-C hole now, so.
Well, we will leave that up to people's imaginations.
Sure. So today, we're starting a new year, and we're kind of taking it back to basics today. So, we're the Motion Design Hotline. We turn your motion design problems into helpful advice, actionable, useful things is what we do. So if you have problems, you bring them to us, we fix them, and then we send them back to you fixed. I think that's what we do, right?
Preferably After Effects related problems. But I mean, if you just have like life advice, we could try. There's just no guarantee that it will be valuable at all.
Yeah, it's usually pretty bad. Outside of motion design, we don't have a lot to offer you. But hello, everybody in the chat. Thanks for being with us. Rick Adams, what's going on in Toronto? Umbercorn, hello. Marlon, Katarina. Oh, man. Clever Devlin. So many people. Wade, what's going on? So many people holding it down in the chat being with us. You might be.
I see my friend Dana over on YouTube, and he has combined our names into Kevin Hamrams.
That's us, Kevin Hamrams. Yep. So what we're doing today, we're going to be talking about some basic 3D stuff. We've covered 3D things on the program before. If you want to watch an archive of that, motiondesignhotline.com, a real website for real people. But because there are some new features, right? What's new, Kyle? What's new in After Effects? There's nothing much new about us, but...
Quite new to the program. It was available in beta for most of last year, but fairly new is the ability to import 3D models, actual 3D models that you can turn around and stuff directly into After Effects. And with that come several other features. There's some revised things about the workspace that they've been kind of sneaking in there over the last several months. And with these new models, you can also light with HDRI images, which gives you some interesting capabilities. So
yeah.
And while those features are brand new, we're going to go over some stuff that's been in After Effects for a long time as well, because working in 3D in After Effects does bring, several new things that you need to know if you're used to working mostly in 2D.
Yeah. And so like, while there are these new technical things, I think a lot of what we're going to be talking about is pretty evergreen. So if you're still on an old version of After Effects, this is still going to apply. I mean, really what we're going to be talking about is going to be applicable to a lot of 3D systems or just 3D ways of thinking kind of in general that I hope are going to be good. Kyle, I've switched it over to my screen so people can enjoy looking at some stuff while we're prattling on about our various technical gewgaws, etc. But I might as well just say, like, you can tell this stuff is true 3D because if you look at these little widgets out here, these are real 3D models. We can orbit all the way around them. They've got beveling going on. They're casting shadows upon each other out here. They can intersect with each other, and it's real. It's the real 3D geometry, which for our purposes today is just going to make it a lot easier to teach about 3D stuff, right?
Yeah.
But
no, we don't have to waste a bunch of time doing all these hacks and stuff that has been the reality in After Effects for a long time because it's not 3D software.
The only hacks on the program shall be me. Because I'm elite hacksaw. No, it's because I'm a huge hack. So let's, I guess, start at the beginning, right? Let us begin at the beginning. Lord of the Rings. So if you are making a composition, you can come into your 3D renderer tab over here, and you can choose like the way in which things are going to be returned to you in 3D. This is the way it's going to understand the 3D world. I think, Kyle, you're going to talk a bit more about this in depth, but I just wanted to mention you can change it in here, and I'm going to stick with the advanced 3D myself. And this just means that when you make something 3D, those are the rules that we're going to be basically abiding by. You can always change that again later, and I'll just make some text out here text, which is a vector layer, and vector layers, because they're defined by math, can of course then be, when you make them 3D, you can double tap the A key or just twirl down into their geometry options, and we can give them some extrusion. You can kind of see a little bit of extrusion happening.
And this is a good time to just quickly point out that which engine you're using does matter, because if you're in the classic 3D, you will not have geometry options. That option just won't exist.
And so we're gonna, over here on your composition viewport, composition window, right? You can see down here we've got advanced 3D. If I take it to classic 3D, that goes away, and I can go back to the advanced, and I can go to the C4D, the Cinema 4D. It's going to think about it for a while because it's changing the rules of the universe for us to hard snap into this. If there's any people who are big fans of multiverses and whatever, that's kind of the idea that's going on here. Now I've got a beach ball going. Maybe I shouldn't have done that.
It's the beach ball universe.
Yeah, we're now in the multicolored beach ball universe. But we're going to be having to navigate and move around in the third dimension, which you would think is a barrel of laughs, because how much fun, like, Kyle, you and I nominally live in a 3-dimensional universe, so you'd think
nominally
we'd be pretty good about getting around with that. But some of the things that get really confusing about it is just looking at things, just finding your way around. So I want to call your attention to the top of your keyboard. Numbers 1, 2, and 3 are your best friend. That is, you can see cycling through my camera controls. Number 1 gives us the orbit. Number 2, the pan. Number 3, the dolly. Right. There's my dolly.
Can I add a quick comment about that? Because we'll inevitably get this question. Would you be so kind as to go up to your preferences?
Beep, 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 beep. Oh, wait. Not my settings. Yes. Settings. And go down to, oh, wait, which one do I want here? Hold on. General.
Well,
no, wait, 3D is down at the bottom.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
So I wanted to point this out because this is a thing that has confused people for about a year and a half now. A lot of us are used to using timeline markers, which you can number and then be able to press the number keys to jump to those. And a little while ago, in preparation for some of this 3D work, they took 1, 2, and 3 so that you could use them as camera controls. But you can disable that in here. So if you still want them as timeline markers, this little box is how you do that. If you want them for camera stuff, you need this box enabled, and then you can't have 1, 2, and 3 for your timeline markers. So take your pick.
Yeah. Now I've never used the numbers for my timeline markers, so I don't miss them
Blasphemy.
at all. Because I am nasty like that. So that's just how we do it. And also there's the 4, 5, 6 as well, which if you like cool gizmos, that's how that goes. Okay. So that's going to help you get around, right? You can just look around. And right now we're looking through an active camera. There is no camera, so we're moving the kind of default view. You can come up to view and say reset default camera if things start to get wacky and start to get away from you. But you should probably, if you want to do something in the scene, make a new camera. And this is an object like any other object in the world, right? We must give it attributes. It behaves exactly like a regular camera with a few exceptions that you can modify any component of it that you wish. So in those ways, it's nothing like a real camera.
It's like a real world camera if you could magically change everything about it anytime you like.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. That's it's a magical camera that you can change. So like if I say this is a 50mm camera, it's like having a 50mm prime camera, which is close to what we are looking at right now. If you go longer, a longer lens or a wider lens, you are changing the way this looks. So I'm going to make a 50mm. Oh, look, it looks exactly the same. Okay. I'm going to make a new camera and I'm going to make a 15mm, right?
Yeah.
Blorp. Whoa.
Love it.
Real stretchy, wacky. So you can see that the effects of things being near or far are more extreme. Now, when I talk about this is something that we can modify about our cameras, we can come down into the camera itself and camera options. You can modify that zoom so you can actually change the zooming amount. You can see that we are now compressing. I'll show you a bit of a dolly zoom later, but the important thing to remember is these are attributes you can change about the camera. Now, Kyle, there's a different thing about this camera that is untrue of normal cameras. I don't know if you've ever gone to the store and purchased yourself a 2-node camera before, but they're pretty.
Oh, you don't know me.
That's true. We don't. Yeah. I don't. You have access to different stores than I have here.
Yeah, this is a different country. We have cooler stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So a 1-node versus a 2-node camera. What does that mean? A 1-node camera is exactly the same as you would imagine a camera that you hold in your hand is defined by a place that it is and an angle at which it is looking. So if you go into the camera and you observe its attributes, transform, we've got some position, orientation, and rotational values. Pretty cool. Now, if we come into here and we change it into a 2-node camera, we now get a second thing here called the point of interest. To help us out to understand what does that mean, I'm going to switch us into the 2 view here. And
see my helpful visual down here? Look at this. Huh?
That's very helpful. That is good. So I'm gonna change one of these views here to be the top view. And here you can actually see the camera itself. And when you look at that, you can have a look at the point of interest. So the point of interest is what you are gazing upon. If you are coming from maybe other 3D apps, you might know this as a target tag, right? This is really similar to, or the look at function. Like we must always look upon that object. You can also see this cool cone here. Wouldn't you know it? That's the angle of view. So that's useful to know. Like that this is that lens zoominess. So we come down here to the zoom. And you can see that it's getting wider or longer, so you can enjoy all these physical attributes of stuff. So hopefully that's pretty helpful.
And if I could quickly mention, one thing that some people might not open that camera back up, if you will.
Okay. Sure.
And sorry, not that. Just twirl the layer open.
Oh, twirly twirl.
You might notice that some of the camera features that you are used to having aren't there, like depth of field, for example, which does not exist in the 3D render, but does exist in Classic and I believe in the Cinema 4D one. So this is one of those things, you know, when he showed that screen before, you can kind of see the list of all the things that exist and don't in this universe, as he said it. So you need to kind of take a little time and just educate yourself about what features are available in which renderer.
Again, Wade's saying also known as follow mode in some nomenclature. So yeah, different verbiage depending on where you're coming from and what you're doing. So hopefully that helps. Okay, so let's just really quickly, I'm going to talk about constructing this scene here that I created. Let's give this a little play. I'm in Draft 3D mode, so you can click on and off Draft 3D. When you go into Draft 3D, you're going to notice, oh, well, things don't look quite as nice, but they really do rip. They resolve really fast. Like it's almost real time in Draft 3D mode, and quite frankly, a lot of the coloring and shadows and stuff is pretty accurate. But you can also toggle on in here your like work planes and such, and your little extended viewer if you want to see the universe beyond the edges here. So those are available to you in this mode. But what if we want to do what is basically a simple orbit around something, right? That's a pretty classic move that we like to do in 3D. So how to do simple orbit? Well, the main thing is neither the 1-node nor the 2-node would be particularly useful for us in this regard, right? So I'm going to go ahead and just reset some of the behaviors or the properties of this text here. And let's say the text is firmly in the middle. Remember, we're still at this two up view, right? So we can see the thing, we can see the camera. I want to orbit around, right? So logically, we're going to go from this side. And so I'll just keyframe the position here of this, and then I'll move ahead in time, and I'll just grab this thing, and I'm going to move it over to the other side like this. But this point, the point of interest, that's going to remain, locked in the middle center. So what's that? Oh no, it's flying through. Oopsie doodle. So that's not exactly what I wanted. So if you come into here and you have a little look-see at your keyframes, which you can see out here see it here, a little square. Well, or actually, you know what I'm going to do? Let's turn off that there. Oh, now that's nice. We can really appreciate it. I can grab the convert vertex tool and I can actually bend this to take a different path around. So that's going in a pleasing arc. And with most things we want to have nice pleasing arcs, that would bring me a lot of joy to have. But the unfortunate thing is that that's kind of difficult. And, you know, it's okay, but it's not great. And it takes some finesse to get the thing to really do what we want. But we generally want to use...
And a second view.
Yeah, that's true. It needed 2 views. But hey, this is fairly realistic to how a camera would work, right? We're going to move the camera and we're going to move the place we are looking. And that's actually how humans operate cameras to begin with, right? That is the normal flow of doing the thing. You move yourself and you change where you're looking. Right? You don't think about the angle of your head and your eyes. You think about what you want to look at. So
maybe you don't.
Right, that's true. Again, sorry, I'm making a lot of assumptions about how people observe the world. Sorry to all of our chameleon listeners, all of our chameleon viewers out there. We know you have 2 cameras in your head. You operate them independently. We know. Okay. Yeah, I can get canceled by Big Chameleon. I just know it. So how do we get around that? Well, one sort of option that presents itself is to use another layer. I'm going to use a new null object. I'm going to make it 3-dimensional. I'm going to parent the camera to that null. Now the null you can see here is living in the middle center. And if I give that a little rotate, if I just rotate that null around, you see that it's just dragging the thing around. Now this is something that we can really only do financially in 3 dimensions.
You know what? No, you can absolutely do this in the real world.
Okay.
If you clamped your camera to the end of a broomstick, seems like a very influencer sort of thing, and you just turned the broomstick around yourself. That's exactly what you'd be doing here.
I think we've actually seen some people on Adobe's various social medias show this technique by taping a broom to a ceiling fan. It's danger mode.
That sounds very safe.
Yeah, this is totally a good idea. You should do it. But now we can achieve a really easy orbit, right? And I can achieve that orbit here with the Y rotation simply enough, right? We're just going to go from 0 to 180, take me all the way around, and then let's just continue our rotation 360 degrees. Hey, we're back at the beginning, right? And this is going to just have a good time. Oh, wait. Did I make this going super slow? I don't remember. I did. I think I just made this go at like a minute. That's too much. There we go. Let's take a no time at all. So we're going to just do a little orbit around. Beep, 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 beep. Boop, 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 boop. There we go. So right now these are linear. So number one question that we get, Kyle, is how do I make smooth motion? How do I be smooth, Kyle? Help me. How do I become smooth?
With an iron or sandpaper.
Perfect. Good.
Yeah. Those are the best suggestions I have. Yeah.
So, I mean, I want to roll with your ironing idea. Look at how, I want to say, angular this is. We need to smooth this out. So we might take these and we'll just ease them. F9, right click, right click on them, ease them. Click your little easy ease. We're down to the graph editor here, so things are going to get a little wacky. And all right, Kyle, I think I've nailed it down here. Let's just have a little look.
Let's see that.
Okay, well,
did you want that stop on the other side?
Yeah, I mean, it's slowing, but perhaps not smoothing. So here's what I'm going to do. I am going to raise these points up. I'm going to raise them up so that they don't hit the floor. They don't reach 0 time. They just slow, right? They slow but don't stop. And we know that it doesn't stop because it doesn't hit the 0 mark here on our acceleration graph. If you are more of a value grapher, if you value graphs, then what you want to do is avoid flat plateauing. You want to just grab this and give it a little tweak, right? Which you can do with our pen tool, right? You can just grab this and say, I don't want it flat. I want it to be a little bit askew, like that. So that's...
And we have a whole episode about this specific kind of stuff from last June.
Exactly. We have so many episodes. MotionDesignHotline.com. All the best episodes are there. Real website for real people. And
also the rest of them.
And yeah, and all of them are there. But one thing I like to do is in the speed graph, I like to double click here and I like to say, I like to lock it so it's continuous, a continuous incoming and outgoing, and just kind of line all these up on the same speed. So now they slow, but they don't stop. Kyle, I've eaten up 20 minutes running my mouth over here. So I want to just show the simple orbit real quick here. And just to say, how do we produce this? Well, we've got a null that is rotating. And then at the same time, I've mixed in a shift in orientation. So if I'm going to remove my little my little fun orientation thing that I did here. I'm going to reset that so you can kind of see how that's looking. All I did, like this is the basic boring snooze time, right? That's not great. So how do I spice? How do I make it good? Well, you start to Dutch angle this stuff. So I'm using the Y rotation to power the spin, right? And now I'm going to offset that axis a little bit. Let's be looking down. Let's be looking a little this way. Let's be looking a little this way, right? I'm composing, I'm framing this exactly how I want it. Then I need to return to that in the end because this is a loop. So I'm just going to copy and paste. And in the middle, what I want to do is basically Dutch angle everything the opposite way. So from 16, I'm going to push it onto the opposite side. I'm going to push this down to the opposite side. I'm going to push this down to the opposite side. Kind of like that. So we're going backwards on that. And that's going to give us from this way to that way, back to this way. It's just adding more visual interest and it's giving us fine control over this stuff, right? So super useful to be able to work that in. Talk a little bit more about art directing your stuff. When you've got your hero element, right? The text is our hero element. Remember, the camera is parented to the null. So if I keyframe the Z position, and you can separate your dimensions when you right-click on position, I'm able to then bring this closer and further as we sort of go around it. And that's giving us the framing that I want as we change from one side to the other. So that's a nice way to frame stuff up. Remember, the null is controlling the angle with which we are observing the thing, and then the Z position is controlling how near or far we are from it. This is a bit of a cheat, right? This is a bit of a cheat because it's based on the rotation of the null. We're always going to have a pleasing arc between the different places, as opposed to what could end up being a very rushed or hurried kind of whipping of the camera around. Like we have an astronaut on a cable and we're just helicoptering them around in the universe, right? We, tie the astronaut to the helicopter and spin them around.
That's a 2023 sort of metaphor, Evan. We can't do that anymore.
Right. Sorry. Yeah, we don't do that around here anymore. But that's just one way that you can produce nice and kind of smooth way through with this stuff. Now, the other thing you're going to notice, I got a bunch of greeblos out here. I have a whole bunch of little 3D things that I've just thrown out into the mix. These are a bunch of tiny widow models of keyframes that we have produced for the good people of this show. So if you're watching this, you can go and you can download those at MotionDesignHotline.com.
You get a keyframe, and you get a keyframe, and also you.
Yeah, and just those three people, though.
Yeah.
So you import them like anything else, right? You double click and you go ahead and you find your globes. Now, at the time of recording, GLBs and GFLBs,
GTLF,
GTFO, like yeah. Kyle.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's what we can download. I've exported these as GLBs, and if you bring one of those in, it creates a little folder, brings the thing in, you drop that down on the timeline. The first time that you drop one down, it's going to ask you to figure out the scale of the thing, which is very useful to get things scaled exactly how you want. Important. If you know that it was modeled in meters, make sure this is meters. If you do it in centimeters, it'll be 100 times smaller than you hope it would be. I think
take a second to scale your thing here so that you aren't working at like 10,000% scale or 0.1% scale, because that's pain in the butt.
Well, it keeps everything nice and manageable, right? Because these, to get them the right size, it's only 128 scaled up. Now, I did use a little expression in here, Kyle. So here's an expression. Seed random index true. random, random, random. This is just assigning a static random rotational value to each of these. And then I'm just copying, pasting a whole bunch of them. But then we need to art direct where they are. And there's a lot of ways to do that. And, control of things is pretty critical.
Yeah, why wouldn't you just randomize the positions, Evan?
Well, because you end up with stuff like intersecting each other in weird ways, or blocking our view, or in the case of some of these, just not being particularly interesting. So you can see that I've made sure I've got some in the foreground that kind of occlude our view and then drift out of the way. And anyway, I'm trying to be fancy over here is what I'm doing. I'm trying to do the bare minimum amount of work to make this look the way I want. But one of the ways that can really help you do that is I'm just going to lock down everything in the scene that I don't want to really futz with, right? So there's a whole bunch of stuff and I don't want to mess with it. I'm just leaving all of these things accessible to me. And you can just grab them as a bunch or singularly and start dragging them around. And what's really nice about this is we're dragging them relative to our view, which means it's really easy to bunch stuff and get them moving sort of relative to how you want to compose the frame in terms of busyness, right? And the other thing that's really nice is you can snap into different views, or if you're having trouble sort of getting this like exactly where you want it, so you can click on each of the arrows and that'll only move it along that axis. But you can also say, hey, I want to set my axis based on the object. I want to set it based on the world, like on the universe. And then this might help you get it exactly where you want. Or orient it based on the view, which is super useful because that makes forward and away from you always relative to where the camera is. Super helpful to art direct this. Now, I'm going to say this about sort of directing the stuff before we move on to, let's say, a bit more complicated example with something. That a lot of the times you're more painting with the things. It's not an exact science. It's about feel. It's about just setting up a nice, pleasing angle. And that might mean that things have a truly bizarre orientation of the stuff in order to produce what you want. So there's some pretty great posts whenever you see how like 3D movies are made and it has like disembodied hands that are coming into frame, right? And like, that's what you got to do to make the shot look good. It doesn't have to be true. You're not building a real diorama. Kyle, I've talked about my thing enough. Kyle, we want to jump to your screen and see. This is
speaking of dioramas. Yeah.
Speaking of,
but yeah,
segues.
that is a good point to make, and why when you're building something like your example, it's important to kind of focus on, the hero element and maybe your camera move before you spend a bunch of time putting all those things in the exact right spot, because that exact right spot is relative to what your camera is looking at and the move you created and stuff. So as with most things in motion design, start with the big pieces and then worry about the details as you go. So I built, maybe as kind of a nice counterpoint here, I built essentially a diorama of a little solar system so that we can talk about working with parenting things in 3 dimensions, and I can touch on lighting and stuff more as well, since Evan kind of concentrated on camera moves. So I'll show you quickly this thing that I built, and then we can dive into some of those pieces. It has some sound design too, so I'll shut up. So you can see here, I'll let this, just mute this and let us play. This is a lot of things orbiting one another, and a lot of things parented to one another. So not too dissimilar from some of what Evan just showed you, but instead of just orbiting around one thing, we have a planet orbiting around a sun and moons orbiting around that planet and a satellite orbiting around the moons. And then our camera is actually connected to the planet. And then I'm just kind of using some keyframes to manipulate what it's looking at. So we can dig into this here.
This feels so much like Star Trek Voyager or something.
Yeah, or very much like a solar system documentary we would have watched when we were younger or something like that.
Yeah, that's true.
Kind of the vibe I was going for.
And horror of the universe.
Yeah. I was real hyped, like having that satellite pass close by the camera and like it turns just perfectly so that we can see the light and all that business. That feels very Like those are the touch points of that kind of thing, in my mind at least.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to kind of quickly talk through the setup here. And Evan, let me know if my sync feels off. I feel like I might be a little behind or anything, but
I don't know. Seems pretty good to me.
okay. So I have built a quick little kind of mock-up version of our solar system here, but in 2D, so that we can kind of look at the basics and then take it to that third dimension. So I have this planet here, and the way that I built this is I have nulls actually doing the work here, and then my objects are parented to those nulls. That's not going to make a ton of sense here, but once I start moving into 3 dimensions and I want more control, that's really, really helpful. So I have this sun null, which you can see is right here at the center, and to that is parented the null for the planet and the sun itself. And so if I rotate that null, you'll see everything else is kind of parented up the chain to it, right? If you know anything about parenting, that's not super complicated. And so then we have like the planet null that has the moon and the satellite, and then the moon null has the satellite. So I could animate all these, and rather than making keyframes, I'm just going to very quickly do something, which is how I did most of this, saying times. I'm creating an expression by alt-clicking, and let's say times time asterisk 50. And so that's going to take the time of this composition, multiply it by 50, and then make that be the rotation of this thing. So let's just quickly copy that to each of these. And so now, if I animate this, we'll see they're all rotating around their own little axes at that same time, okay? So this is the general concept of how I built my composition. I wanted a little more control over those. So if you add just a little bit of code in here, I'm going to type the word value and then a plus in front of this. In this way, you can still change the value of the thing so that you can art direct it a little more, but then it's still driving itself. And then, of course, you could make these different times if you want. Maybe you want your planet to rotate twice as fast, and you want that value plus. And then you want your satellite to rotate even faster, so you could say value plus, and then make that 150. So let's just quickly look at that and kind of see we have a much different thing now. That's probably a little more realistic to how a universe would work, right? But now we need to kind of take this concept and bring it out into the world of 3D, right? Which means one of the things that's going to happen is we're going to get a lot more options of the axes. You kind of saw these axes to work with. So by clicking our little 3D switch here, now I get an orientation and then X, Y, and Z, or Z if you are one of those folks. And so you can orbit, you can change all these things in multiple dimensions. So let's go ahead and make all of these objects 3-dimensional, and so they'll respond to what we're doing here. I do have a camera in this composition, so let me kind of frame that back up. And now, if I were to rotate this on the y-axis, for example, you see that it's rotating towards and away from us. So what we'd probably want to do for viewing purposes is actually move these expressions to the y rotation on each thing. And then what you could start doing is figuring out how you want everything placed and the speeds and stuff. I just thought this would be a simpler way so that we're not actually working with the 3D objects, but we're kind of up to that point. So I'll just bring one of these in, say our sun here, and that is going to force us to change over to the advanced render. Just prompts me to do that. I'll go ahead and just replace my sun with that, and then you can kind of see. Let's turn off this, go ahead and parent that to that. And now you can see that we have an actual 3D object, and you can kind of see where this is going here, right? Because we have things that actually have geometry. They aren't just flat sheets like everything in After Effects was previously.
Here's a beautifully modeled, I want to say cardboard, like a cereal box sun.
Exactly.
Another one of those beautiful models you get to enjoy.
And just to kind of point this out, now, because the reason that I'm using nulls to do all this is so that I can have individual control over what these models do. So now I have this sun, and I could tell that like, well, maybe I want you to be rotating. We'll just say this is times 30. Maybe I want you to be rotating on Z as the other things happen. And so because we use nulls, now we can have individual control over our models. I could play with the orientation if I want it, leaning this way and then rotating on its own. You could play with all the different axes. You could move it independently from the null if you wanted to. So let's talk a little bit about lighting, because that's really what makes 3D stuff look good, right? When 3D stuff is kind of naked, here's like kind of the naked version of my little solar system here. And it looks fine, but it's way less interesting because everything's just kind of pretty flat, right? Even though they're 3D models. Let's talk a little bit about how lights work here in After Effects.
Right.
I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I'm on the classic 3D engine here. And I'm going to create a light. You can do it up in Layer, New, or you can do, what I'm going to hit is Control, Alt, Shift, and L. And then there's different types that you can create. I'm going to go with a spot because that kind of makes the most sense to me. Similar to the way that the 2-node camera works, you have the light itself and then the thing that it's looking at, okay? And you can see that right here in the viewer. You can move around the thing that it's looking at. So if I point it over here at this planet, you see there's the cutoff, the edge of the light, right? And in the old classic render, you have the ability to create shadows. You can change the cone of the light and all this kind of stuff. And all that stuff still exists, but this advanced render does have some different settings for the way that the lights work here. And I think I'll go ahead and just hop into that because it's more interesting. So here's a composition using the advanced render, and you can see I have a couple of those models. I have just a flat thing, and then I have some text that is extruded here. And it's just sitting just off this, and it's extruded just enough to kind of reach that plane sitting behind it. So let's go ahead and add in a light, but I'm going to choose environment light, okay? And so what this does, it has a default setting, and then beyond that, it lets you choose images that can be used as lights for your scene. So there's not a ton of options here. You can cast shadows or not, and then you can choose how dark those are. I'm just going to say OK, and so this is the default setting. And you can see already, like, I've got actual shadows, and if I were to move this thing a little bit, the shadow follows along. You can see as it gets further away from that plane, the shadows follow it. If I intersect that plane, the things that intersect don't cast shadows, right? And already, like, I've been a big fan of using this kind of technique where you extrude a piece of text. This is like 20 pixels in front of the plane, and you can make some neat looking stuff by pushing a little piece of text out. Gives you some nice features. But let's take this. This is just the default one here. Let's take this and make it more interesting. So there's two different things that you can do. You can transform the light. This has an X rotation, which is around like this, or a Y rotation, which is like you saw me do with the planets a minute ago, okay? So let's move the Y rotation and see how that affects our scene. So you can see it's like I'm moving the sun, right? So I'm moving this around. Yeah, exactly. And look, even just by doing this, we can do some really interesting stuff. You can obviously keyframe this property. So again, you don't even need to move your objects. You could just create a basic 3D scene like this, and then just move your light around and already create some pretty neat effects. Now, I do want to point out something about this renderer, and it's that because this is a more advanced 3D render, you can have the objects, you can have environment lights like this. You need access to quality controls because you don't want to always have your machine like chugging super hard to make stuff. And you saw Evan click the Draft 3D button, which you can see in this case kills those shadows, but it lets you work really fast. If I use the camera orbit tool, look how fast that is. It's just doing all of that, real time. But if I turn that Draft 3D on, let's do that same camera move. Look at that. because it has to process all those shadows as you move things. So let's come into that little drop down where you choose which renderer you're on. And you can also find this under your composition settings, but you have renderer options, okay? You get all these quality settings here. I have mine set relatively low right now. You can set your render quality for the whole scene, and then you have a bunch of controls for your shadows. Let's go ahead and set those to a low resolution, and I think you'll already start seeing, I'll go ahead and set the smoothness down. You can see how noisy those get, right? And the other thing that I think, so as you're working, you probably want to set things low, set your smoothness down, so you can work fast and not spend forever just placing things. And then when you get ready to actually export your scene, you can crank this up to whichever one of those feels necessary. Start cranking up the smoothness until your machine, until your GPU yells at you.
Yeah, until it catches on fire.
Yes. So I'm going to set this back down and point out the other thing that I think people probably really need to understand, which is this casting box size. Okay. So the shadows only exist within this casting box. Look at that right there. You see the edge of the box, and then this piece of text isn't casting shadows beyond that, because that's where I've ended the casting box. I could, however, move this over if I wanted to. So if you need shadows, but you don't want it to be processing the whole scene here, you can actually be really carefully curating what parts of your scene are casting shadows because of this, okay? And so again, just for performance or whatever, you can be specific about that. There is this fit to scene button. That's, in my experience, that's usually going to make it a lot bigger than it needs to be. So I'm going to go ahead and dial this back down. And set this back at 960 here. And we're going to say that's good for our purposes here. And because I have that quality set down, I'm not on Draft 3D here, but this is pretty responsive, right? So take advantage of lower quality settings while you work so you don't waste your time doing stuff for no reason, okay? I think that's big. So let's look at the other big thing for environment layers, which is actually using images to light something. I'm going to go ahead and give myself some quality settings back here. Let's crank these shadows up a little bit here. So when you created an environment light, it's defaulting to using the default light, but then it can use any HDR images that you put into the composition, and they can just be turned off. I can show you quickly. I've got these are all just from Adobe stock, basketball court, this fancy loft, a canyon. You get the idea here. And then the HDR images are that, but softened, because they're useful for lighting. If you want a hard version so that you get like super shiny reflections, you can do that too. But you see, these are all just nested down here at the bottom of my, not nested, they're just placed down here at the bottom of my composition. And then here on my light, I just choose which one of those I want to use. So let's say I want to use that basketball court. So I choose that, and now it's using that image to light my scene. You'll see in this case, the shadows are a lot softer, and the lighting overall is like a little bit warmer, but not as bright. So depending on your image, you might need to crank up the intensity, and then you can, again, move this around. Look at that satellite dish and the moon in particular. You see all the shadows moving around on those, the reflections moving around. So the materials on your objects really start to matter here, because like this dish on the satellite is reflective. And so it's picking up that image. And now, if you were to rotate the model or rotate this environment layer, you're getting that realistic response and reflection. What do you think so far, Evan? Trying to kind of watch the time here and make sure that we get what we need.
That's true. That's true. I think that's good. I think people are getting the lighting. I think I wanted to talk a bit about some motion paths and stuff. That might be useful. Let's jump back to Evan's screen real quick.
Yeah. Why don't you take that over then?
Okay. So here is a little scene that relies a lot on objects kind of exploding in an interesting way. So we're moving back. We are framing where the action is going to be. And then we're like blasting stuff into the zone, right? Like we're going to look at the zone. We're going to throw stuff into the zone. And the way that works is we're able to craft these little paths that things go on. So this is a keyboard, mouse, and screen. Again, motiondesignhotline.com. Get your hands on these models. They're nice. I made them myself. And he said proudly of his modeling. I like the keyboard because it bears minimal resemblance to a real keyboard. Anyway, it was hard to make all the holes in there. I want you to appreciate all the little holes that are in it. But the more detail in the geometry, the slower the thing is going to go, yada, yada, yada. You know, that's just important stuff. But how do we get this kind of exploding motion, boom, like that? So it's done by changing the position and then using your convert vertex tool to give the motion path this tweak. You can grab the handles, drag them out to produce this type of a motion path. But it's really helpful to look at this stuff in sort of two views. Mm-hmm. And especially remember that things don't tend to like spiralate, for example, as they blast off out here. I'm gonna make sure we're in the draft 3D so we can skim it real quick as it goes. But you can see that it's bent basically on this axis, right, to form this arc, but then pretty tightly aligned on this axis. Because it'd be strange if it was doing like a curveball kind of blast. But you can shape it into any which way you want, right? You can make very advanced movement. But the type of, I want to say, exploding, the kind of burst and drift that you want to do with this type of thing really comes down to getting into the motion path here or the graph. So in the position, I've just grabbed this handle and I've bunched it towards the start. So it's going to be chillin', then explode. This is, the big movement, and then it seems to drift in the air. And that's the same thing that's being applied to everything. So all of these little bits are doing the exact same explodo type of move. The other thing that's going to
What's happening on your desk, by the way?
Which, my desk here in front of me?
Well, I mean, this virtual desk. Like, what's causing this? This seems very disruptive to your work.
Well, I was trying to make the monitor seem like it's sneezing because the Motion Design Hotline is blasting so much knowledge out of it.
Yeah, there you go.
All of these keyframes. Now, here's another thing I want to say. This monitor doesn't have anything on it. So this is how it looks normally. I have put a composition that is a 3D layer, and I have just moved it so that it lives inside this monitor, right? And it is, if we look at it right here, we can grab a hold of that and we can go into its object moving. Here we go. And you can actually push it so that it like intersects with stuff. The screen is actually pushed back a little bit, so you would see some of that monitor edge.
So, for example, you could use the exact same strategy to be making phones and stuff right now with, everything that exists in After Effects today.
Exactly. You just have to make sure that whatever is on the screen is living inside its own composition. That's a great way to keep things nice and organized. Yeah. And you just make it 3D. And remember, this is all 2D, so there's no limitations on what you're doing inside of that. It could be anything. It could be footage. It could be logos. It could be an app doing stuff. Anyway, that's the idea, that you want to fill this with stuff, and that behaves like the screen. Also, I think this mouse is pretty nice. That's modeled off an actual Mac mouse. Things used to look like this. You got to believe me. Now, the other thing I want to talk about in this scene is the camera movement itself, the way it is moving and changing. Now, I've keyframed the zoom and the position of this to perform what's called a dolly zoom, which is a kind of movement and compression of the angles, so that it's starting a lot flatter feeling, and then as it moves back, it becomes a more extreme type of angle. And then when things explode, they don't need to come as close to the camera to seem like they're getting super big. So that's the thing about wanting to squish or expand and compress. So like you can go even bigger with this stuff. So let's say that when the explosion happens, right, that we want this to, get further back like this. And then I'm going to, that means that I have to animate this coming forward like that. But you can see how much more chaotic this feels when that kind of happens, right? That can really blow the stuff out. But you really want to make sure that these curves are exactly the same. So you can see how the zoom here, like it needs to just woe it down so that its curve looks similar to the curve of the dolly action, that they both have to be basically peaking at the same time. And now if you wanted to do this with a real camera, it's really hard to do, right? Because physically doing this is hard.
Yeah.
But virtually doing it is as easy as aligning those two variables, right? And it's just happening at the same time. So anyway, that's a fun little thing that you can do to bring things together to make them more extreme. Now, Kyle, did you talk about the CC environment?
I didn't. Okay. So that would be a great thing to kind of cap it off. And that lets me talk a little bit about effects with this, which I can kind of hit on all that pretty quickly if you want.
That's true. Yeah, so we might as well, because in this, the camera's moving around. You can see it's like in a special environment. I am using the CC environment effect, which basically projects a sphere around us. And that sphere is just looking at a layer that has, a bunch of gradients and stuff stuck to it. And it's a way for us to kind of make the stuff kind of look interesting back there. Like I can just put a gradient on it. Okay. Well,
if you want something to follow your 3D camera, that's a pretty easy way to do it. CC environment.
CC environment. Now, Kyle, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time, and we have something very special we need to talk to people about.
That's true. Why don't we talk about that?
Why don't we? So we are doing a contest. Kyle and I, because we are very benevolent people, would like to give you fabulous prizes. So we are going to be running a little bit of a contest because these are new features, and I think a lot of people, this is maybe your first time doing 3D stuff in After Effects. We want you to have some incentive other than praise and the slight amount of dopamine that comes from the adulation of your peers. We want to give you physical objects. So if you make something in After Effects using True 3D, what do we want them to do, Kyle? We want to do, what, 2 things?
Well, okay, so we want them to make something. As a reminder, all of the models that you have been seeing today that Evan created, the space stuff, the desk things, the keyframes, those are all available on motiondesignhotline.com. You find today's thing, and then you will be taken to a little link where you can download the project files as well as those models. Make something cool with them. And you need to post it by what date?
It's going to be Friday, the calendar.
26th, January 26th. Okay.
January the 26th of this very month.
So you get a couple weeks here. And what we're going to ask you to do is post it to Instagram, of course, as people do with things. And you're going to tag us as humans. You're going to tag Adobe Live. And then you're going to hashtag it Motion Design Hotline.
Yeah.
And then from those amazing submissions, what are we going to do, Evan?
Well, you and I are going to observe them. We're going to look at them. We're going to, I don't want to say judge them. We're going to enjoy them is what we're going to do. We're going to celebrate
Hopefully
them.
Everyone enjoys them.
Yeah. And we're going to pick a winner out of that based on our kind of arbitrary criteria of.
I think that involves judging. Sorry.
Right. Sorry. Yeah. We're going to give them a power ranking. Some will be S tier and some will be, and we'll make them fight each other in a tournament ladder. No. We're really just going to be kind of evaluating based on, what feels fun to us. We'll pick a couple of our favorites, then we'll discuss them. Well, we'll probably show all of them on the show, but what we want to do is have a look at them all, and then someone will be chosen and we will send them fabulous prizes. One prize taken from my very own collection will be the Canadian television program Reboot on DVD. So you will get to enjoy physical DVDs of Reboot. If you don't know what
foundational 3D animation program here.
Yeah, it's not random that I'm giving away DVDs of Reboot. It's normal because this is new 3D technology. At the time, Reboot was made using the latest in 3D technology, and I think you're going to get a kick out of watching Reboot. So
the other prize that arguably is far less exciting to most people is Of course. You know, it's a lot like this, except in t-shirt form.
Right. It's a hat that you wear on your body. So we'll be giving those
torso
objects,
hat.
Yeah, so one torso hat and two seasons of Reboot will be coming your way if you partake in our little game. So again, post it on Instagram, tag at EC Abrams, that's me, tag at Kylosaurus_Rex, I think that's you on Instagram.
Yeah.
And you want to also tag at Adobe Live on there. So make sure
we'll obviously be posting words on Instagram and such. So, if you don't remember all the details right now, that's okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't remember things. Just go to motiondesignhotline.com, download the files, start playing them. You've got the whole month to enjoy making stuff and sending it to us. You've got plenty of time to practice and make things. Don't get in your head about it. Just have fun, play around with it, and make something cool. Or make something terrifying. I don't know. I'm happy to be scared. But yeah, send it to us. We want to see it. And if you want to send multiple things, we're happy to see that. But that's what we're going to be doing. We'll be reminding you throughout the month. I think that's pretty much it for the show. Like I say, you want to get these project files, motiondesignhotline.com, a real website for real people. That's you. So you can enjoy learning all these things, getting your hands on all this stuff. You'll see a lot of things that we didn't really talk about in here that were like the fancying up of our files that I think you'll probably enjoy.
Yeah.
I don't know, Kyle, anything else before we call it a day?
I mean, I assume we're out of time, but I don't know. Thanks everybody for watching. It's great to be back on here in a whole new year and hotlining it up.
Exactly.
Let us know if there's something that you want us to talk about. That's the whole point.
Exactly. So until we see you again, stay creative, be kind to each other, and we'll see you all around the internet. Bye for now.